Ever feel like sometimes international politics is kind of like a game that you just weren't invited to? Well, today we're going to give you a backstage pass, so to speak, to this high-stakes game. It involves Greenland, Russia, and even, yeah, you guessed it, former President Trump.
Wow.
We're diving deep today into this pretty wild story, actually, about how Russia allegedly tried to use get this, a fake letter about Greenland to influence U.S. foreign policy.
Sounds juicy.
Oh, it is. We've got some really interesting excerpts today from Newsweek, also Bloomberg, and then we've got some commentary from Dean Gloucester, this writer, who always has some pretty insightful things to say. You ready to kind of untangle this whole web of intrigue?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think this is a really fascinating look into how information warfare is really kind of changing, geopolitics.
Okay, so let's start with kind of the main allegation here. So Danish counterintelligence, they believe that Russian intelligence actually went and forged a letter. And this letter was supposedly from Greenland's Minister of Foreign Affairs and sent to U.S. Senator Tom Cotton. And the letter actually requests funding for a referendum on Greenland's independence from Denmark.
Interesting.
What are your initial thoughts on this? Like, why would Russia even try to pull off something like this?
Well, it's a pretty clever tactic when you think about it. From the outside looking in, it seems like Russia's just supporting Greenland, becoming independent.
Right.
But if we dig a little deeper, it's probably more about kind of like, creating some issues, sowing some discord between NATO members, and maybe even disrupting U.S.-Danish relations. Because you could see how a, forced referendum could create some instability in the region.
Right.
And then Russia could use that to their advantage.
And this is where Trump's, pretty public interest in Greenland comes into play, right?
Yeah, exactly.
This wasn't just some random target that the Russians picked.
Not at all. I mean, Senator Cotton actually admitted that he talked about Greenland with Trump after he got this letter.
Oh, wow.
And we all know how, Trump has said publicly that he's interested in acquiring Greenland, especially because it's strategically important. And, all the resources there, the gold and the diamonds and all the rare earth metals.
You mentioned strategic importance. Can you kind of break that down a little bit more? Why is Greenland so strategically important, especially in the Arctic? Like what's going on geopolitically there?
Well, I mean, just look at it on a map. Greenland sits right between North America and Europe, and that makes it a really key location, for things like military bases and just keeping an eye on everything going on up there.
Right.
The Arctic is, becoming more and more important every day. And then on top of that, the ice cap is melting because of climate change.
Right, of course.
And that's opening up new shipping routes, and, there's more access to all these natural resources. So that just makes Greenland even more strategically valuable.
So Trump sees this potential, this value. And, some people might say he's just focused on the money. But, you could also look at his interest in Greenland through the lens of national security, right?
Well, yeah.
And maybe wanting the U.S. to kind of dominate these resources.
Totally. I mean, Trump, he does talk a lot about economic gains. That's definitely true. But his administration, they were very focused on making sure America was on top when it came to important resources, critical resources.
Right.
Like, it makes you wonder if getting all those minerals in Greenland was part of a bigger strategy, to kind of counter China, for example. They've got such a strong hold on the rare earth metals market.
It's amazing to me how all these events were kind of like, influenced by something so simple, right? Like just a fake letter.
It's wild.
But let's kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about Greenland. What's their perspective in all of this? Because in a lot of ways, they're the ones caught in the middle of this geopolitical tug of war.
Yeah, Greenland's perspective often gets, kind of lost in all the noise.
Right.
Which is unfortunate because, Prime Minister Mute, he's been pretty vocal about wanting Greenland to chart its own course. He's open to negotiating with the U.S., but he's also made it very clear that the people who live in Greenland, they don't want to be controlled by Denmark or the U.S. They want to govern themselves.
Yeah.
Which is totally understandable. But trying to do that, be autonomous in this crazy geopolitical landscape, it's tricky. It's like walking a tightrope.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about Greenland, but let's circle back for a minute to Russia's motivations here.
Sure.
Dean Gloucester, he had this really interesting take on this whole thing. He said that, I'm quoting here, "The plan to purchase Greenland was devised by Putin's intelligence to create divisions within NATO." What do you think about that? Does that line up with, Russia's bigger goals?
You know, I think Gloucester makes a really good point. If what he's saying is true, it means Russia is playing like a very high level information warfare game here.
Yeah.
Like they're trying to really undermine Western alliances, weakening NATO, creating competition for resources, pushing for more influence in the Arctic. These are all things that Russia has always wanted.
Yeah.
And, planting this fake letter, it's almost like a test. Let's see how the U.S. and Denmark react. And if there are any cracks in their relationship, let's exploit those.
This situation really, to me, it just shows how hard it is to know what's true these days. It's not just like fake news articles on the internet anymore.
So much more than that.
Right. It's forged documents, it's narratives that are being manipulated, and it's these covert operations that are being used to influence things that are happening all over the world.
Yeah.
How are we, as people who want to stay informed, how do we even begin to figure out what's real?
You're asking the million-dollar question. It is tough. Trying to figure out the truth in all of this is like, I don't know, trying to climb Mount Everest or something.
Yeah.
The most important thing is to think critically about everything. We need to learn how to be media literate, be aware of our own biases and really question every piece of information that we come across.
Right.
Because this whole thing with Greenland, it's just one example. This information warfare is happening all over the place. And it's not just governments doing it anymore. Think tanks, news outlets, even regular people, we can all get caught up in these really complex games.
It's really kind of mind-blowing when you stop and think about it. So if Russia was willing to do all this just to try to, mess with U.S. foreign policy, what else are they up to?
Yeah, right.
Are there other stories, other narratives being shaped, other events, being influenced by these tactics? And we just don't even know about it.
That's the question we all need to be asking ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. So if this whole deep dive has kind of piqued your interest, I really encourage you to keep learning about this stuff.
Yeah.
Research, the U.S. and Greenland's relationship, what's going on in the Arctic geopolitically right now, or even just learn more about how Russian intelligence works. Stay informed, think critically, and just engage with these global issues because they do affect all of us. This story about Greenland, it might seem like this faraway political drama, but in a lot of ways, it's a reminder that we're all living in a world where information is the main weapon.
Absolutely.
It's an information battlefield.
It really is.